If you know the X-Men or were at least alive in the 90s, which I was not, you'd definitely recognize this little tune. That is of course the theme song for X-Men the Animated Series, or as I like to call it, X-Taz, an extremely popular show from the 90s. And although X-Taz was almost universally loved, I have a little secret. It wasn't really my cup of tea. Like Tim Burton's Batman, it's almost impossible to ignore or downplay the cultural significance X-Taz has had on the superhero genre, but it never really captured my heart in the way I had hoped it would. But an X-Men show that I did connect with would be X-Men Evolution, a show that gets overshadowed by X-Taz, but never outshined. X-Men Evolution was a show from the year 2000, and honestly, most people I talk to have never even heard of it. Evolution had a much more polished look than X-Taz and a superstellar voice cast, including the late great Kirby Murrow, who unfortunately passed away recently. Also, for the sake of convenience, I'll be breaking this review down into sections, starting with the overall plot of the show. The plot of Evolution, like the plot of most X-Men shows, is fairly simple, but in a good way. The main X-Men team is aged down to be teenagers in this series, and it focuses on them discovering and honing their mutant abilities. The first season of the show is basically just assembling the team, which is awesome in my opinion because it helps you get very familiar with the core members of the team before it goes a little crazy and adds in a ton of new X-Men. But even early on, there are several plots threaded throughout multiple episodes, like the mystery of what Mystique and the Brotherhood are up to. Who is this mysterious, armor-clad Ian McKellen type? It's Magneto. But hey, don't get me wrong, the longer arcs are appreciated, but I think that just for this show, it really shines on its one-off episodes that lean into developing our young heroes and their relationships towards one another. I mean, episodes like Middleverse, Spike Cam, or The Beast of Bayville are just really good examples of when the show takes a step back and looks at specific characters and how much they can grow in 22 minutes. Not to mention, those one-off episodes are really fun, they're almost never boring. And then on the opposite side of that spectrum, one of my least favorite things about this show is how much they built up Apocalypse to be this menacing threat, and then when he's finally awoken, the episodes begin to drag as they start to feel a little too samey. And perhaps that's not proper dialect, because arcs are supposed to have consistency. I just think that some shows would truly benefit from remaining in a mostly episodic format. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Marvel's 2017 Spider-Man show that lacked an original title. What are you gonna do about it?
Little Goblin Jr. Gonna cry?
Oh, wow, sorry. I forgot how much I didn't like that show. But now that I've gotten all of that out of the way, I think it's about time we talk about the characters in X-Men Evolution. Trust me when I say that Evolution has a wide array of characters, so in order to keep this section tidy, I'll only talk about the ones that I think differ from their usual appearances in a good way. Cyclops can kind of be seen as a junior team leader in the show, and they found the perfect mix between comic Cyclops and cartoon Cyclops to write him. He is just charming enough to be endearing, yet still carries his trademark characteristics of toxic masculinity he's become known for, and that's especially visible in the second season. Evolution didn't try erasing his flaws like many other mediums, they simply dialed them back so that we can still root for good old Scott Summers. And I actually want to group up Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde in this review for a couple of reasons, the main one being that these guys have one of the most underrated friendships in all of animation in my opinion. Not only that, but they also parallel each other in many interesting ways. For example, they were both very wary of their mutant status at first, albeit for different reasons. Kitty for her powers, and Kurt for his appearance. So over the course of the show, you see the two of them begin to accept life as mutants, especially out in the open, and their friendship blossom from Kitty resenting Kurt to them being just the best of buds. But I also think that the biggest character arc overall is Kitty's dialogue.
But we agreed you were staying home today.
Yeah, well, like, what's the point, you know? You guys don't want to talk about it, and I'll, like, totally go crazy sitting around here.
The X-Men known as Spike is the perfect visual representation of how much a character can change over the course of the show. He starts as a scrawny kid with little to no control over his powers, and he can barely make porcupine spikes. And then he ends the show as a flaming javelin-throwing badass. It's incredible. And when he first showed up in the show, I'll be honest, I thought I wouldn't be able to care less about him, but by the time that he left the X-Men, I was genuinely upset. And my only complaint is I wish we would have gotten to spend more time with him post-Team Sewer Dwellers. Wolverine was pretty prevalent in Evolution as the kind of tough love character, and his main characteristic was just be cool. Yeah, he's a cool guy, sometimes maybe even a little too cool. For example, the first time we see Logan, he's on a motorcycle. He takes off his helmet, slaps on a cowboy hat. He goes into a gas station and buys a bottle of water, then immediately swapped his hat for a helmet again. So I guess he's just a fashion icon. And then there's another time, once again, he's on his motorcycle, but this time he's being chased. And despite his handles featuring mirrors, he just pops out his claws and checks his reflection in those. Which is just unnecessary. I know it kinda sounds like I'm complaining, but trust me, I am not. I love the idea of Wolverine trying too hard to be cool, especially when he's around a bunch of teenagers he secretly wants to impress. And anytime he's on screen, I have a good time, especially when he's around his daughter, X-23. Yes, X-23 is in this show, Wolverine's female clone / surrogate daughter, also known as Laura Kinney. Yup, that one. If you know anything about X-23, you're probably thinking, wow, 2002, that's a really early appearance in animation for such a recent character. And you'd be right, as this is actually her first ever appearance. Like how Batman the Animated Series created Harley Quinn, X-Men Evolution created X-23, and now they're both irreplaceable characters in their respective comic lines. That's just a testament to how good this show is. It really pulls off everything well, including the themes of the X-Men. The X-Men, to me at least, have always been about dealing with prejudice and bigotry in society. And that becomes clear when you remember that Stan Lee and Jack Kirby created the X-Men as a statement about the civil rights movement. Over the years, the idea of the X-Men has changed to represent many minorities and how they are treated, one of the most important ones being the LGBTQIA+ community. That's a mouthful. Now, I'll admit, I was pretty worried that X-Men Evolution would not adapt these complex themes, especially early in, as episodes and episodes went by and they never once mentioned why they hide their powers. In fact, the word mutants was only stated in the first entire season of Evolution a handful of times. But this all changed in the very first episode of the second season that deals with the X-Men trying to stop the Brotherhood from outing mutants. In my personal opinion, they simply never mentioned the fact that mutants aren't accepted in society in the first season so that they could first ease people into the concept of the X-Men before delving into heavier topics. And by season 3, Evolution doubled down on how society judges and treats mutant kind, all based on something they can't control. Just look at season 3, episode 3, it's titled Mainstream, and I mean just the bigotry emitting off of this episode is enough to get me worked up. When Evolution finally tries to adapt the X-Men's main fundamentals, they do so with flying colors. Overall, I rate X-Men Evolution a 6 out of 7. On its best days, it's a fresh and fun take on the X-Men that delves deep into lore and character, and on its worst days, it's still a good show, just one that misses the mark due to predetermined arcs and time management. I would recommend this show to any fans of the X-Men or just Marvel in general, so please, go watch X-Men Evolution.
Nothing stops me! I'm raw power!
Yeah? You want a raw tough guy? Then take it raw!
What did he say?